Hey guys, and welcome back. So if you've been following some of the building collapses here in Korea, you might be wondering, if I come over here to South Korea, am I safe if I go into a lot of these high rises? What the heck is going on? Because if you remember back in the summer, there was that strange building collapse, and just a few weeks ago, there was another building collapse in the same exact city, involving the same exact construction company. Well, I'm gonna lay it out for you, and I'm gonna tell you a theory of why it probably happened and give you some of the explanations that Koreans themselves will probably not want to give people outside of Korea the frank answers. I'm gonna lay it out for you. So if you didn't see my last video, which occurred over the summertime, that was a controlled demolition. That was a building that was supposed to go down because they were going to redevelop that area and put up a different building. But that was a demolition gone wrong, and it was only 5 stories. But that building had tilted over and actually hit a bus, and 9 people in that bus perished. And it turned out that that was a case where there was massive corruption within the subcontracting of the subcontracting of the subcontracting, where basically you give the contract and then people try to then cut corners along the way and then just try to cut profits. So let's say that, like, I gave you a project to, get rid of this building, and you're like, I don't want to do this work, let me hire somebody else. And they're like, I don't want to do this work, let me hire somebody else. And they keep hiring other people, and then you don't oversee the job, and you're like, it'll probably get done, and you don't even know who's doing the job. And pretty much it's in that kind of industry, it's kind of like gangsters or lowlifes or whatnot, and there are no safety mechanisms at that point, and then something strange happens. And that company that had got the contract was Hyundai HDC, which is like a reputable company in theory. Same company that was building this recent fancy iPark apartment complex in the same city of Gwangju, which is in Jeollado. And so this was the 39th floor that they were working on, and while they were working on it, it collapsed. The concrete just kind of melted. And so this was January 11th. So this was this month, a few weeks ago, and already there's been a lot of analysis of what went on. Unfortunately and fortunately, there are experts and protocols. Like, what's fortunate about this is that in Korea, I am at least reassured that there are people who know what they're doing. There are protocols that are in place to do it the correct way. There are procedures and standard operating, like everybody knows like how to do it correctly, and people have these laws and procedures to do it the right way. So when they were doing the studies and when they were analyzing the situation, everybody could kind of see like, oh no, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, and that's wrong. Like everybody in Korea could kind of see like, that's where it went wrong. But then on the other hand, what's so not reassuring was that how brazenly all of those steps were disregarded. And so I wanted to go over like the main red flags so that you could probably spot them. And also it's kind of like a fun, nerdy scientific experiment, even though it was tragic, and about 6 people have passed away because of it, and most likely they were foreign workers. So again, exploitation of foreign workers again in Korea. So this whole iPark apartment is one of the strongest brands in Korea in terms of like, if you're gonna choose an apartment to buy, and usually you try to buy it like at a good deal before it's built. And usually you try to go with like one of these big builders like a Hyundai. And even with one of these big companies, one of their premier brands like an iPark. Why? So that when you put down your deposits and you're paying along the way while it's built, you're assured that the company's not going to go bankrupt and you're not going to lose your money. You're assured that while you're paying, you're going to get your apartment done on time, so that while you're paying, you're going to be able to then time your investment and then either move in or rent it out, or everything is kind of like you can trust the timeline and the process. Well, apparently this project was about 2 months behind schedule, and that's why this company started to cut some corners. What corners did they start to cut? Well, they weren't supposed to work through the frigid winter, because laying down concrete when it's super, super cold, like while it's snowing, apparently is not what you're supposed to do. Because when you lay down concrete, which is like a very good construction material, very strong, but it uses water. And when you lay down concrete, you wait for the water to evaporate and then it strengthens, and then you can move on. But when you're doing it when it's super cold, the water is ice. It doesn't get to evaporate. And then you think it's solid, but it's actually ice bubbles inside the concrete, so that by the time it warms up again and the water evaporates, it's almost like Swiss cheese. And then so the concrete has not had its due course, and so like all these layers, it's like this layer cake that is now Swiss cheese layers, and so it's not solid. And so once all the water evaporates, it's like a sandcastle instead of like solid concrete. And so that's what started to happen when it started to get warmer. Now, apparently there is a way, if you just have to work through the winter and work through snowy conditions anyway, you can insulate and then like kind of put in like super heaters while you're working, but apparently they didn't even do that. And while you are laying down the concrete, apparently there's supposed to be like a concrete representative to make sure that the concrete is done properly. That wasn't even done. And apparently the concrete itself, they had cut corners and tried to allegedly take out some profits there. I mean, you've got to be really low, because concrete is like what? It's like a mixture of sand and water. Like, this is just like cheap material, and you're trying to cheat people out of that? And so apparently there were like 8 or 10 vendors of this concrete, and even the concrete manufacturers were taking their cut. And so we saw like corruption on top of corruption on this. Not only that, the design itself apparently had some flaws. Like, you could either brace it through the walls, which is the best way, but then they wanted to do it through the columns, which they said like it's more risky, but I guess it's better for design. It gets more aesthetics, but you got to be a lot more precise. Well, they didn't get it to the precise measurements, and so that was flawed. So it's kind of like the classic case in Korea in terms of like Korean style corruption, where each little party of like the subcontractors thinks that like, well, if I kind of like cheat a little bit here, and if I cheat a little, like nobody will know. Well, you add them all up together and the thing collapses. And so in this case, classic example where everybody kind of takes a little bit of a cut, and the thing collapses. And they even said like they didn't even have the basic protocol of like while you are building each layer of the apartment complex, you put up these strong braces. So like they were building the 39th floor. So while you're doing that on the 38th floor, you put up these temporary steel braces because the concrete hasn't set yet. They didn't even put those up. So they're just like, what the heck is going on here? Like, who was in charge of this? And was this another case of subcontractor hiring cheaper subcontractor so that everybody can kind of like try to squeeze out some sort of profit? And why? Now, the why part is not being explained, and I don't think will ever be explained. But I want to give you my hypothesis because in response to this, specifically in response to this, because this happened twice in less than 1 year in the same city, in relation to the same company, they did pass, I guess it was like a rush job, the Serious Disasters Punishment Act, and it carries a 1 year prison term or a 1 billion won fine, which is less than $1 million, to the head of the company if the company has an event or an accident that causes death or serious injury, and they go to the top. Of course, the businesses are saying like, what the heck? This is so unfair because, you know, the CEO doesn't manage the actual construction, like what's going on here. And I would say, like, again, this is like one of those things where, like, you know, foreign investors might be like, what the heck? This is a little bit weird. I don't know if I want to take that kind of risk or liability. But in the case of Korea, this is what they're targeting. Because why would a situation like this occur? Why would a case like this occur? And why do I bring this up? Now, the reason why I think in this particular case, if this is what's happening, because this is what it looks like it's happening, is that this is a case where at the top is negotiating the bribe. The bribe has to be paid out from money somewhere in the company. And the money has to be then siphoned out of profits down the chain. And so the people who are the lawmakers are targeting the top. So let me break it down. Most likely, the head of the HDC needs to then find a way to take out some slush fund out of the company, pay somebody, and then be like, dang, we need to cut the profit somewhere. Sends it down an order down the line. All these subsidiaries have to find a way to kind of like cook the books, find some money to extract, send it on up the chain, send it up to the emperor, which is basically like the CEO. And then this is what happens. And then everybody else is just like, shoot, my bottom line has gotten cut. How am I supposed to afford this? I gotta, then scramble and hustle and cut and make up for my losses, and down and down and down it goes, because Mr. Emperor has to then, has to basically eat off of everybody else's plates. This is something that Korean people won't tell you, but this is like what's on a lot of Korean people's minds, and this is like what they'll probably be talking about behind closed doors anyway. But most likely, I think the reason why it's involving Hyundai HDC in the city of Gwangju is that Hyundai actually is pretty much a company that is very much favored within the current government, which basically means that Hyundai probably has to grease the wheels, pay money to the current government, and most in particular, the region of Gwangju is the region that's most favored, that gives the most votes to the current government, and probably the region that has the most manipulatability to basically control, you can control that area more than the other regions in order to do your bidding, to kind of extract some money out to send up to the government. So yes, the emperor of HDC is like siphoning the money out of the company, but is he really eating all of it, or is he sending it on up somewhere? And so my theory is that he is essentially having to pay the Pied Piper, which is not necessarily the CEO. So don't blame the CEO, blame the government. You know, whoever they have to grease in terms of the government and the bribes that they have to make, that's probably where this money is going. And the victims are probably the part of the corporation that's most easily victimized is that region. So apparently a lot of these iPark developments have taken a hit to their brand, even here in Seoul, even in like the priciest regions in Seoul. People want to change the name of their apartment complexes. A lot of these units are coming out onto the market now. It's impacting prices. So they need to get it together, because I do believe that actually if you're going to be that flippant with people's lives and be that careless with construction when everybody knows what's going on, because kudos to KBS for doing such a great analysis and documentary on this, because they just showed the video to professors of architecture, and they were just able to look at it and say like, oh, that's wrong, just with their naked eye. That's how bad and how egregious some of these cases were. And they even tested the concrete, and they even, saw that it was short of required megapascals. So this is just egregious. They need to get their act together. They need to stop trying to siphon profits out of subsidiaries after subsidiaries and subcontractors after subcontractors, because this is crap that you used to pull in Korea in the 1960s and 70s and 80s when bridges would collapse, department stores would collapse. This is stuff that happens in developing countries. So if you still want to be a developing country, Korea, then continue on. But if y'all want to again want to say like you want to be part of the G5 of world developed countries, gotta stop with this crap, okay? Just stop. All right, guys, what do you think? I guess you could still come to Korea. It's still kind of safe, but this kind of stuff, it really makes me mad. All right, guys, leave your comments below. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Talk to you later.